This is Max McLean. How can you express your gratitude for God's grace? Listen to the Bible from 1 Thessalonians 5. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Do not put out the Spirit's fire. Do not treat prophecies with contempt. Test everything. Hold on to the good. Avoid every kind of evil. May God himself, the God of peace, sanctify you through and through. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. From 1 Thessalonians 5. Listen to the Bible. It's great for the soul.
The Bible says that faith comes by hearing. Be able to hear the Word of God today and every day. To hear more, go to radiobible.org.
You're listening to True News, your alternative source for global news, analysis, and commentary. I'm Rick Wiles. This is segment 2 for Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014. Approximately 4 years ago, I began preparing this radio audience that the world would enter the historic war cycle in 2014. Based on previous war cycles in history, we know that there is a high probability of a major war erupting in the next 5 to 7 years that will go into the history books as a game changer for the world. I didn't think we would see world events go red hot until 2017, 2018. Frankly, I'm troubled by the speed and intensity in which this war cycle has ramped up in 2014. NATO and Russia are staring at each other over Ukraine like two tomcats in an alley. Last week, Vladimir Putin visited a summer youth camp and told the Russian kids, "Don't worry, Russia has plenty of nukes, and I'm not afraid to use them." The Chinese PLA conducted an unprecedented number of major war drills for 3 months this summer that repeatedly shut down commercial airline traffic at major Chinese airports. ISIS jihadists are engaged in fierce fighting with Syrian troops in the Golan Heights next to Israel's border. Barbaric ISIS jihadists continue their summer savage carnage of humanity in Iraq and Syria with beheadings, crucifixions, and impalements of humans with Christian crosses. Saudi King Abdullah, whose money funded the jihadists attacking Syria, is afraid his Frankenstein monster has gone rogue. The king warned that ISIS will reach Europe within a month and the USA within 2 months. The CFR reported that ISIS is trying to obtain biological weapons and are studying ways of weaponizing the bubonic plague. Dr. Peter Pry has warned that ISIS could contract with Mexican drug cartels to launch coordinated attacks on U.S. electrical power substations. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers said that there are at least 300 American citizens involved with ISIS. The U.S. government ceased in the summer of 2014 of enforcing the southern border of the USA with Mexico. Judicial Watch said Washington issued a bulletin to law enforcement agencies that ISIS jihadists are on the Mexican border across from El Paso, Texas. Meanwhile, the stealth jihadists in the White House, Barack Hussein Obama, spent the summer of 2014 playing golf and raising political donations to finance the Obamanista revolution to transform America. I have two distinguished patriots on the telephone who devoted their entire lives to protecting the American people and the Republic. I want to hear their opinions on this surreal state of reality. In September 2014, Major General Paul Vallely retired from the U.S. Army as Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Pacific in Hawaii. He is the chairman of Stand Up America. The website is standupamericaus.org. General Vallely, welcome to True News. Glad to have you back.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. And U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney served his nation in numerous command positions. He retired in 1994 as Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, U.S. Air Force Headquarters in Washington. This is his first time on True News. General McInerney, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Rick.
Yes, sir. General Vallely, I'll start with you. My introduction, this is surreal. This is like something from a Tom Clancy novel. What is going on in this country?
Well, it does seem surreal, that's for sure, but certainly it is real what is happening. And if you go back, as General McInerney and I've studied, the whole world changed in 1979 when Iran took our hostages and the real war began that set off everything in the Middle East. And then, when we settled the Cold War, we had a strong president with a strategy named Ronald Reagan. And that Cold War came to an end in the early 90s. And then as General McInerney and I visited the Middle East in 2003, we were able to put together a sense or analysis of what was happening over there, and we wrote the book Endgame. And that really was a plan on a strategy to defeat terrorism, which now General McInerney likes to use, which is a war against jihad. So in that regard, we've had a working relationship for a long time, General McInerney and I have, at Fox together in the early 2000s when we covered Afghanistan and Iraq, and have followed since that time all the happenings up through the ISIS situation at this point in time. But I think the most noteworthy thing is now that we have a leaderless White House, lack of a strategy, probably the most inept national security team we've ever had. And it's a travesty because the United States borders, the United States itself, we are constant targets and will be a target soon, as we both predict. And we could see something happening, of course, on this 9/11, which we would like to be very confident that our government was securing the borders in doing so, but I'm not that confident that they have done the necessary job.
General McInerney, is Barack Obama inept, incompetent, or is this man brilliant? I tend to believe he's played golf all summer because he's very happy with the way things are going.
Well, Rick, he has a different view of the world than General Vallely and I do. He grew up at the knee of Frank Davis and the tutelage of Saul Alinsky and a whole host of other people that the mainstream media has failed to examine. And his vision of America is not for us to be a global superpower and to help maintain peace and economic growth in the world, but it's to be, we were the problem in his world when he grew up as a superpower. And so he believes that differently than we do. And that's why he's been playing golf and going to fundraisers, whether it was the attack on Benghazi, and he goes to a fundraiser the next day, doesn't do anything to help rescue those 33 people that survived and the 4 that were killed. Or like today, which 2 years later, as we again go into another political campaign, he is not changing the alert status. I have recommended that we go to Defcon 1, which is our highest alert status, as we lead into 9/11. We've never done that, and people say, well, why should we do that now? And I say, well, if you don't agree with Defcon 1, what do you want to do? How do you alert American forces and our allies worldwide that there's a potential attack different than 9/11, the first one, but a potential attack against U.S. interests, as we had 2 years ago, as we led up to an election. And he had a political narrative of what the world should be. Osama bin Laden is dead, GM is alive. And he's trying to use the same political narrative now as he leads into these midterm elections, that everything is okay, don't get excited. Yet the British Prime Minister David Cameron has gone to an increased alert status called severe, which is their second highest in the United Kingdom, and we have done absolutely nothing. The president is avoiding the national security realities by trying to keep his political narrative that everything is going along well. So you can say he is brilliant because he has unilaterally disarmed us, when I was the Vice Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Air Forces Europe at the height of the Cold War in 1988, we had 4,000 tanks in Europe as part of NATO. We had 5 heavy mechanized divisions, as General Vallely knows so well, as he was part of that. And we could get 5 more in 10 days because we pre-positioned those tanks over there. And so we would have had 10 heavy armored or mechanized divisions. Today, we have 0 tanks. I repeat, 0 U.S. tanks in NATO. And our fighter wings over there are about 10% of what we had in the past. So he has unilaterally disarmed us. President Putin sees it. You have the synergy of what's going on with ISIS in Iraq, then what Hamas did to the Israelis, and then the movement into Crimea, and now into the eastern Ukraine. All, I'm not saying this is orchestrated, but I'm saying it is targets of opportunity that our adversaries look at and see a world with a leaderless United States. So I believe the president has executed the game plan, the vision that he had when he said he was going to transform America. He has ensured our economics stay at 1 to 1.5% without growth where we ought to be in 4 to 7% with the potential we have with energy independence, with tax reductions, a whole host of things that we could do. And he persists in keeping Obamacare, which will make sure that we are never able to rearm, because Obamacare will consume all the dollars in the U.S. Treasury that would normally go into the Defense Department. So, yes, he has done it what he wants brilliantly. But look at what kind of world we're in. We're on the verge of another global war, world war, with what's going on in the Ukraine and in the Middle East simultaneously. This is very, very worrisome.
General McInerney, when you said on Fox News a week ago that we should go to Defcon 1, it jolted a lot of us who are closely following the events in the world, because I know what Defcon 1 means. And for someone of your stature to say Defcon 1, it made a lot of us sit up and go, how serious is this situation right now? But Defcon 1 that's nuclear war.
Nuclear war is imminent.
Yes, sir. Are we at that stage?
Well, we are at a stage where we don't know. We are at a stage of there's so much uncertainty. You know, without nuclear war, we could have, well, there'd be partial nuclear, but an EMP weapon over the United States, just one weapon, could have the same impact as multi-nuclear weapons going off in U.S. cities in the long term. The cyber potentials of hitting our banks and smashing our economy. So the term Defcon 1 came out of the nuclear era against the Soviet Union. Nuclear war was imminent. My modification of that, Rick, is something is imminent and we are not paying attention. Whether it's nuclear, EMP, whether it's a cyber, no matter what it is, something is happening out there, and we're asleep at the switch like we were 2 years ago when those people in Benghazi knew 2 weeks before they were going to be attacked that there was going to be an attack, and no one did anything. And what I am also saying is, and I believe General Vallely strongly agrees, that we are facing a crisis where military leaders know something is going to happen, not specifically maybe, but they have their responsibility for civilian leadership and authority, control of the military. But that is starting to run into the Constitution, because each one of these generals and admirals have sworn to uphold the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So I believe we're going to be moving in the coming weeks and months to a constitutional crisis for the military on orders that if you have a civilian military authority that lets things happen, like in Benghazi, and very soon this Friday, there's a new book that's coming out called 13 Hours, and this is going to spell out what happened there, and this is going to just shock the American public that we let this happen, and the president then went off to Las Vegas for a fundraiser. So I said Defcon 1 with a purpose in mind 2 weeks ago.
General,
a week ago.
When the commander-in-chief issues the order to go to Defcon 1, what happens? Tell us in military terms, what is the chain of events that begins to happen?
Well, we've never gone there, but I'll tell you in generalities what it is, because part of it, I'm sure, is still classified. But the fact is, globally, every American military man and State Department and parts of the U.S. government are aware that we're in a very high threat situation. And we start preparing on the homeland, on emergency cities, etc., go to a higher alert status. It awakens everybody that we must be prepared for the very worst. And the DEFCON 1 could be put forth with certain caveats to it. The president could, but he could still get the same alert status. And for those that say, well, we shouldn't go to DEFCON 1, I say to them, all right, what do you want to do? Right now, we are doing nothing. What is your recommendation? What should we be doing as we lead into 9/11? And you have ISIS ripping across the Middle East. You've got Putin ripping through eastern Ukraine. You've got Hamas, although there's a temporary ceasefire, they're going to start it again. You've got potential Hezbollah firing into Israel. So we have a global situation that our British allies, Prime Minister, is taking very seriously, and yet everything is fine in America.
General Vallely, General McInerney just said that we're moving into a constitutional crisis because the civilian commander-in-chief will not carry out his constitutional duties to protect the nation. As a man who spent your entire life defending this country, what's going through your head, your heart, at this time in 2014 as we watch the United States of America in a free fall?
Well, I'll describe it in a meeting I had with General El-Sisi last year. I've met him twice. I'm giving that as an example of a crisis that existed in Egypt. And sitting across from General El-Sisi, he said, you know, America seems to be dealing now in politics and not in the realities of what is happening in the world. He said, here in Egypt, we have to deal with realities. And that was the most important thing he said to me. Because when you look at the White House, you look at Obama and his team, they're constantly dealing in politics rather than the realities that General McInerney has just described. So that's what brings us to a constitutional crisis. It is time that we call for a non-confidence vote in Congress to all stand tall and demand that this national security team be relieved of their duties, be replaced, and if not so, then we must lead to impeachment, because we cannot tolerate to put the entire United States, our population, our assets all over the world, our people, our families at risk any longer. That's how dangerous it is.
Do you think House Speaker John Boehner would even allow a no confidence vote to take place?
I was with Mr. Boehner 2 weeks ago out here in Montana, and I questioned him on a number of things. And, of course, Speaker Boehner, he always has reasons for not doing things, just like we had to really put a full-court press on him with the Benghazi Commission coalition that General McInerney and I are a part of, to press him for a select committee and appoint Trey Gowdy. and that's coming to fruition here, beginning with the Select Committee hearings in September. So, no, John Boehner won't do it. But it's, again, like Harry Reid. I asked Speaker Boehner, how can one man in our Senate have so much power and you don't take it away from him? Because you can't play politics as usual anymore. We are at war. And Harry Reid is a detriment to making progress within our House of Representatives and the Senate, with some 850 bills that he won't bring to the floor. So Congress is as much a fault, Rick, in many ways, because they don't have enough forceful leaders to stand up and be counted. They're good on getting on television now and being interviewed, as we see every day as we watch. But certainly we have a totally inept government right now, government incapable of making the right decisions to secure the republic.
General Vallely, do you think that the current so-called humanitarian crisis on the Mexican border, do you think it's a real crisis that just happened, or is this a coordinated invasion?
All indications are that this has been planned out. The White House knew about it. They're part of it, of opening borders. It's part of the whole open border syndrome or policy that many would like to see happen, where we don't have any borders at all. And, of course, this is fed right into that. And so Stand Up America, which, by the way, General McInerney was an initial and is currently a part of Standing Up America, and we're so happy that we get his support in what we're trying to do. And we came forth with a new article this morning on the southern border and what's happening there. There again, no strategy, really nothing that's going to secure our borders, as General McInerney pointed out, with ISIS forces now teaming up with the drug cartels. And so the biggest threat we have now, a lot of chatter going on, that something may happen in the Fort Bliss, Juarez area on 9/11. So that's the kind of alert Defcon that General McInerney was alluding to, which is a direct threat to our underbelly. And it's been assisted, planned out by our White House in a way, but yet the cartels and ISIS will take advantage of that weakness. And that's exactly what General McInerney pointed out, is why we need to go to a new, more clearly defined DEFCON 1 for the country.
General McInerney, I've been very outspoken on this radio program for years. I said in 2007, 2008, Barack Obama is a communist. This man is an enemy of the United States. He's going to bring about destruction of the republic. I believe time has proven me to be correct in this. This is not an issue of we've got an incompetent buffoon in the White House. I believe we have an enemy of the nation, a domestic enemy in power in the White House, who is orchestrating the destruction of our nation. At what point? I mean, you alluded to a constitutional crisis, but at what point do military commanders say enough is enough?
Well, I think that if we have a major incident or an attack, and this 9/11, and we have not done anything, that the American people and even the mainstream media, which has been complicit in protecting his agenda and not reporting all these different crises, whether it's guns for hire, whether it's the IRS, whether it's Benghazi, you go through the list of things, the border immigration crisis, which some say that this was orchestrated out of the White House, and all these signals that we sent, et cetera, and all these different challenges that America has that, frankly, are overwhelming the average American to listen and to keep track of it. Only people like you and General Vallely and myself and there are a number of other people that are tracking this stuff and see it, does it start to fit a very carefully conceived and orchestrated pattern that some could say, well, the president was a community organizer, he didn't have the experience, et cetera. or some could say he is executing a very carefully orchestrated plan on how to change America, transform America, in his words, in a way that bring us to a socialistic, communistic society of redistributing wealth, etc., cutting our growth down, bringing in large amounts of immigrants that really want to live on the U.S. government and our education, etc. You have governors out in California that welcome immigrants and they're paying for their college education when in fact it's the taxpayers. Your taxpayer base is being reduced greatly. Less than half the people in the country are paying taxes. And so we have a crisis not only in our economy and our national security, but also in the demographics that is being changed at such a dramatic pace that we have not previously seen in our history. And to answer your question, when do people come up and say enough is enough? That's a very good question. But I think that this coming 9/11 is going to demonstrate is now the time.
Do you, regarding next week, September 11, are you making these remarks based on just gut feeling instinct, or do you have reason to believe something is underway?
Well, the two are related. You don't see the actions that we've seen in the Middle East. You don't see the actions of an immigration crisis. And what's going on in the eastern Ukraine, and what's going on in Korea and China, where you have them buzzing our P-8 aircraft, naval patrol aircraft. And all of a sudden you start to put these patterns together. You get a gut feeling, then you have these indicators. And as General Vallely pointed out, what's going on in Ciudad Juarez, right across from El Paso. Very worrisome.
At the beginning of the summer, when this manufactured immigration crisis started, I said on this program, folks, I can read the script. I know where this is going. In 6 months, we're going to have a horrific terrorist attack in this country, and then we're going to be told by the politicians and the media, oh, the terrorists brought the weapon over the border. I mean, this is like watching a cheap, cheesy movie. The script is so cheesy. What they're doing, I don't know why more intelligent people don't discern what's happening. General Vallely?
Well, I'm with you.
It is quite frightening. I mean, this isn't a movie. This isn't a reality TV show. We possibly could see millions of Americans killed in some type of weapon of mass destruction being set off in this country. And people are just going about their business like this is all make-believe, like it's on television.
Well, it's a situation where America does not understand the global caliphate, does not understand radical Islam, and does not understand those goals to dominate the world again. So, as they attempted to do centuries ago, we do have a group that does understand that. Obviously, our national security team is very heavily influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood. We have continued reach-out programs to radical Islamic-supported groups in the United States. And so when you have a mindset like that, and you only have a few of the media, such as Newsmax and Fox News and many radio stations that get the word out, we still have even a lot of educated people that I run into that are clueless about what's going on. So that's why General McInerney and I spend a lot of time on television, on radio, ad events with many others to get the word out as to what really is happening. What is the reality of the situation today? Facing it head on, looking at those threats, coming up with a strategy to deal with those threats. Be ahead of the game, not behind it.
General Vallely, the reality is
from behind.
General, the reality is that the U.S. government official foreign policy now is we support the jihadists. That's right. Our official policy now.
Yep, and Claire Lopez, who's a very important part of our Benghazi group, is clearly defined as the radicalization of our own White House. And radical Islamic sympathizers, Muslim Brotherhood sympathizers. And this is treasonous. It was treasonous to release those individuals from Guantanamo Bay to Qatar. All of these things are treasonous activities. That's why we are at a constitutional crisis when we have a commander who is conducting this kind of political maneuvering and lying to the American people. A constant aura of deception, as Joe McInerney mentioned, with the Veterans Administration, with the IRS, with Homeland Security. And then the fact that we don't have enough generals and admirals standing up, and that's what they need to do, and abide by their oath to the Constitution of America and to the Republic.
Thousands of American men died in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we have switched sides to support the very terrorists that killed them. I don't understand the silence. General McInerney, I mean, honestly, I'm outraged. I mean, we have switched sides. We're helping Al-Qaeda. We're helping ISIS. These are the people that killed American servicemen. Why do we have to have this conversation on the radio? I mean, we ought to, can you imagine in 1945, Harry Truman coming into office after the death of FDR and switching sides to the Japanese and the Nazis?
Well, this has never happened before in our republic's history. We have never had this kind of leadership that has such a different vision, and that's why it's so worrisome. I think that the American people, because the mainstream media has been complicit, are still unaware, except for programs like yours and a few others, of what's going on. I think if they fully understood that we did switch sides, that weapons went from Benghazi to ISIS in Syria through Turkey. General Vallely has visited Syria twice, aware of what's going on over there. We ended up supporting the wrong people. And so we're reaching a crisis in this republic that America must be aware, and it's coming fast. And that's why I'm so troubled that we have not changed our alert status as we lead into 9/11. Those people that came through the southern border, Rick, are already in place. There's nothing we can do to stop them. And so it's like 9/11. Those 19 radical Islamists, Al-Qaeda, were in the U.S. before 9/11. And so I think that the American people, and this radio station is very helpful in your program, in making America aware. But what are they going to do about it? What is going to happen to the Republic if the American people don't stand up and get out of a political mode and become aware of what the national security realities are?
We're in the final 2 months of the congressional elections. I doubt if the Congress will even reconvene before the November election, but every congressman will be visiting their home districts in the next 2 months looking for votes. People ought to be demanding right now, get your rear end back to Washington right now and declare no confidence in this government. General McInerney, you've been in the past. You've expressed concern that the missing Malaysian airliner could return. Is that still a concern?
Well, until we find debris in the South Indian Ocean, which I would love to find, then that airplane is a national security threat to the United States. I believe there's a potential, do not know, but I believe there's potential that airplane could reemerge on 9/11 or at some other time, and it could go, for instance, nonstop from Iran or Pakistan or one of the stands into New York and not be detected through certain technological innovations. We should always be concerned until we find that it is a potential threat against us as national security. I don't know where it is.
Are you saying that this airliner could fly under some type of cloaking technology, that it's invisible?
No, I'm not saying it's invisible. I'm just saying if it got where I think it got, it did it through some very clever and innovative ways that it could do the same thing and could end up in Tel Aviv, London, New York, or Washington.
You think it's in Pakistan?
I don't know, Rick.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. General
Vallely, if I did, I couldn't tell you.
Yes, sir. I understand. General Vallely, Clara Lopez has been on this program often. She was here directly after the Benghazi debacle. We have stated repeatedly on this program that this was a gun-running operation. I also maintained for years that Fast and Furious was also a gun-running operation, but it was arming revolutionaries in Mexico to come over the border at a certain time with the weapons. Have you ever thought about that possibility?
Well, not that particular scenario. I think, again, it was an inept operation put into place, as they said, probably naively, to plant weapons down there so they could track them to the drug cartels and others. And, of course, it completely went 180 degrees the other way, and unfortunately we lost a great American down there in that debacle. Again, some of this is planned out. Some of it is just naivete of a commander-in-chief who's been elected, who does not comprehend war, does not understand it, has no vision of strategy at all. And again, it goes back to this ineptness we've talked about. We cannot afford to put amateurs in charge of our government and national security because they're dealing with pros like Putin. That's why Putin is getting away with what he does, because he knows he can do it, because he knows the rest of the world is weak. The Chinese see the same thing. They see the same thing in Tehran. Baghdadi and ISIS sees the same thing. And so when you don't have peace through strength, then you're vulnerable, and that's where we are now, and that's what General McInerney's laid out very clearly, how vulnerable the United States is.
I assume both of you gentlemen are familiar with former the Soviet Union intelligence defector Alexander Golitsyn and his book in 1995, Perestroika Deception. Have you considered the possibility that we're watching perestroika deception unfold in front of us, which is a carefully laid out plan to weaken the United States, bring about the destruction of NATO, and move the United States into some type of global communistic system?
Well, Russia has always been an expert at deception, as Joe McInerney knows. That's part of how they work, and they're masters at it. And we have let down any kind of strategic psychological operations against the Russians and others because we say we can't do those kinds of things. And so important part of war is deception, as you know, and taking the enemy down a road where you want him to go rather than where he wants to go. So that's all part of Russia. They're still tops in the world as the Chinese are. They're just very good at it, and we're not.
General, you were Valley. You were involved in psyops. Is somebody using psyops on us?
Of course, every day. And
it seems to be working.
And so, it's working very well. And again, it's naivete of our media to pick up on that, and that's why we keep losing, because we're losing the psychological operations side of things. And the use of social networking today, much of that is what we call white psyops, where they put out messages, and some of them are true, some of them aren't. But on the other hand, our enemies know how to use our media to their advantage, and that is pure psychological operation.
All right, final question before I let both of you gentlemen go. In the event that we have a horrific terrorist attack in this country in the coming months, and the U.S. Congress continues to do nothing, and Barack Obama does nothing, I'd like to hear from both of you, what should the American people do? General McInerney?
Go ahead, General McInerney. Let him go ahead first, please.
Well, I think we have all different views on that. We have a Constitution that we must uphold. And General Vallely and I both swore to uphold that against all enemies, foreign and, I repeat, domestic. We have certain ways to do that. There's a balloting box coming up in 2 months. There are other things. But if you have an administration that turns out is aiding and abetting the enemy, that's a very serious charge. And we have never faced that in our history. So this is uncharted territory. And it's very worrisome, and I do not have the answer, Rick. I'm sorry, but it's very dangerous.
Do we stand as a people and demand a total resignation of the entire White House administration?
Absolutely. That's the right of the people and the citizens. When you have a tyrannical government and a government out of control that's not representing the people, people can always stand up, and that's our rights as U.S. citizens, as other citizens of the world. And you've seen what they've done in the Middle East, for example. People stand up. That's what they did in Egypt. And I'm afraid, as one individual told me, General Vallely is going to take divine intervention to change this country. That may well be true, but also it may be a cataclysmic event that we've been talking about today that occurs to wake the American people up. I think it's going to be one or the other. I'm not sure politics as usual is going to change this country, but we're hopeful that the elections will prove to be more positive than not this coming November.
I'm leaning on the divine intervention. I have no confidence at all in the politicians. My guest today, retired Major General Paul Vallely and retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Tom McInerney. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on True News today.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Rick.